Okay, and welcome to another episode of the Athletic Development Show. A bit of a different flavour today, trying a new thing. I had a really good question during the week from one of our interns, and it seemed such a good question that I want to share the answer. And so I'm going to try a thing where it's just a little bit of me talking, hopefully giving some insights and value. If you like this one, please let us know. If you hate it, please let us know as well, because I think it'd be interesting to do more of these. But I do want to emphasize the mainstay of the show will always be me interviewing people much smarter than me, because that's selfishly what I want to do. But we might do a few of these if you guys like them. So I want you to imagine a future where we have food on tap and it's absolutely free. Even cooler than that, even better than that, it's delivered to us with an artificial intelligence that determines our exact food preferences and only serves us the food we love. So it sounds kind of utopian, but actually it's a little bit dystopian. So let's call this service InstaFood. And now if we imagine that the business model for InstaFood is such that how they actually make their money is time on feed. So they don't really care about how well we feel, how good we look. They just care about time on feed. And in that situation, with that business model, the only logical strategy would be to send a steady stream of highly digestible food that we loved. And you'd actually, if you were designing it, you would go, well, we don't want people to be too full and we don't want it to be too nutritious. So we'll actually just send mostly kind of a sugary slurry of stuff that kind of tastes good, not too much protein or fat because that'll make you feel full. And that's how you do it. So the side effects of that would suck. Obviously, it's really obvious that if we had these sort of tubes of food coming down to us to our couch and we're just ingesting this slurry, it would suck. We would become addicted to sugar. They would exploit our cravings. We would rapidly lose the ability to digest. So our liver would down-regulate its production of bile, which breaks down fats. We'd lose muscle strength in our jaw for chewing. So we would literally atrophy the parts of us that help digest more complex, nutritious foods. And we'd also get super fat and it would not be good. So that's clearly a bad idea. But the fascinating thing is that vision of our nutrition diet, of our food diet, that's exactly what's happened to our information diet over the last 10 or so years. And we have this problem with attention where for a huge amount of us, our attention has been stolen, really, by these multi-billion-dollar companies that just want to game us. It's like a slot machine thing where they want to game us to get all our attention. And to do that, they serve us a steady stream of really digestible stuff, particularly stuff we already like. So quite catastrophic for our thinking. All sorts of, we're seeing confirmation bias just go crazy. It's amazing to me that in 2021, we've now got more flat earthers than ever in the history of the world. I guess maybe at some point there was actually more a long, long time ago. But yeah, just crazy. And the fascinating thing for me is that I'm a 48-year-old man. I have a lifelong hunger and desire for learning. And I've got a fully formed brain that was built pre social media, well and truly, and yet I still find myself just being sucked into scrolling, and I don't feel good when I do it, but it's a really addictive thing. They've really nailed that side of it, because they have literally teams of psychologists whose job it is to make us addicted to these little slot machines that we put in our pockets and carry around with us everywhere. And when I was a kid, it used to be in Melbourne where you had to go, I'm pretty sure you had to go interstate to go play pokies. There was some rule about not having pokies in Melbourne or something like that. I can't remember the fine details of it. But anyway, I remember thinking of just how stupid and pathetic slot machine people were, just sitting with that glazed look, just pulling the handle on what they called the one-armed bandit, because they were more manual machines back then. And because obviously the great big casinos that they're in, they're making their money because they've rigged those machines. And yet now here I am struggling to keep my attention my own and not give it to the phone. And so it's a real issue. And what I noticed in myself and what I've noticed around, with the people I interact with, is that there is a diminishing proportion of people spending meaningful time on deep learning. It's definitely a thing that's happening. So that's the bad news. And I suppose the good news, though, is that if the population is, if the average level of attention, nuance, thought, and the ability to synthesize and link things, if the average level is actually dropping back a little bit, it's an amazing chance to stand out. Like, you can really stand out and push ahead against that grain. And I think we're coming towards a situation where the ability to read in sustained ways is actually going to become a real superpower that can really enhance your career and life. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit today, about how we can do that. I think the why is fairly obvious, but not to belabor the point too much, in the same way that were we on that the food feed where our liver would stop producing bile, our jaw muscles would get weak. In the same way, the parts of our brain that are good at focusing, the prefrontal cortex, its ability to actually sort of control our brain, that is atrophying a little bit, and long form reading is a great way to get that back. And it helps with everything. It's not just that it helps you at reading, it helps you at all sorts of things. But the first thing you've got to do, I think, is address the fact that if those muscles and mental capacities that enable you to read, if they have atrophied, reading gets really hard. Reading's actually much more effortful than it should be. And so I think step one is, all right, how can you train yourself to read better, easier? Now, I was super fortunate. I think it was maybe year 8, year 9, pretty early on in high school. My dad sent me along to this course, and it was a speed reading course. And it was one of those little things that really changed the trajectory of my life. It was a half-day course, and it was just how to speed read. And the mechanics of it are really interesting. So before we go anywhere else, I reckon it's worth talking about that. So when most humans read, we have this thing called saccades, which is kind of the way our eyes move. And instead of going along the line like a robot or a computer kind of going in a completely linear way, we kind of dance. It's kind of this dance where our eyes go forwards a few words, they dance back a little bit. They trace this really interesting line. It's not particularly efficient. And interestingly, the slower we read, the harder it is to concentrate, because our brain can actually absorb the information a fair bit faster than our eyes are inputting it. So we kind of get distracted. And so at the course, what they made us do was we had a set passage to read. They had a metronome at the front of the classroom, and they set it at a pretty high cadence. And we just had to train our eyeballs to hit the end of the line on the beep, on the tick. It was actually a tick, not a beep, because it was pre-beeps. So it was like tick, tick, tick. And you just had to get your eyes to go. And they said, don't worry if you're not comprehending the words. Your brain will organize itself around that, and it'll get that going. And it was just amazing that after about half an hour of this high cadence reading, where you're training the brain not to dawdle around, not to jump backwards, just to hit that line every single time, your brain just caught up. And that skill stayed with me forever. So I can read books way faster than I could otherwise have. And its ability to consume information, it's massive. I've taught that to my kids, and they are hilariously fast readers. My son's now faster than me, but it's a really good hack. So it's as simple as just have your metronome, read some lines of text, just get the brain into reading faster. Except that you won't necessarily absorb it all the first time. It is a bit of a skill, but it's literally a couple of hours investment, and it'll change your information consumption hugely. So yeah, give that a go. There's a Tim Ferriss article on how to do it as well. We'll link to that in the show notes. But yeah, hugely beneficial. So assuming you're going to do that, the other thing is, I think if we're trying to tidy up our information diet, the best way to do that is it's actually exactly the same as if you're trying to tidy up your food diet. So the worst thing you can do with food is start taking things out of the diet, start subtracting lots of stuff, and creating an arm wrestle with hunger, because that's literally never worked. It just doesn't work. The very best way, in my opinion, that you can make meaningful permanent change in someone's nutrition is to actually have a more positive mentality and go, okay, we're going to add in the positive nutritious stuff, and that's going to kind of crowd out the bad stuff and push it off the plate. So that works in nutrition, and I think it works really well with information. And so the best way to do that is clearly reading. And I noticed, maybe a year ago, I noticed that I still talked about reading, but I wasn't doing as much of it. I just got so busy that I had that same excuse people often say with their fitness: "Oh, I'm too busy." And it wasn't really true. I was busy enough that I'd let it slip a little bit. And so what I started doing was a really simple thing. I happened to read Atomic Habits, which is an amazing book. I'll talk about a bit later. And James Clear is a very good thinker. He talked about habit stacking. And I just said, that's a really good concept. It's the idea of putting a habit together with a key behavior, so it just happens. And so I started just making a rule that instead of turning my phone on in the morning, I would turn my phone off at night, so it was actually off rather than just asleep. And B, I would turn it on later in the morning, and first thing in the morning, I would get up, go to the toilet, and read for 10 minutes on the loo. Easy, wasn't costing me any more time. It was just a simple thing to start doing. And it's an interesting, easy little hack. And what it's done is it just sets a bit of a tone for the day. So super, super valuable. So I reckon that's a great place to start. Don't try and carve out time from, don't try and fight with your TV watching time or whatever it may be. Just carve out a little bit of time, maybe earlier in the day, and make that automatic reading time. So I suppose that's the key thing is to do that, have that habit, and then just get those reps in. And I think that can be pretty profound. So if you're looking to combat that, shorter form content, get into more long form stuff, obviously, you really want to make sure the juice is worth the squeeze. You want to read good books. And I have put together just a handful of the books that have had the biggest influence on me, and I thought maybe I'd chat to you guys about them. So the first one, I got this book in 1999, and it was the best first anatomy textbook a human could get. It was just incredible, and I think it's actually had a lot to do with a lot of my early success, and I still lean on it today. Very dog-eared. It's called The Anatomy of Movement by Blandine Calais-Germain. She wrote the book at the time she was a physio student and also a dance instructor. And the beautiful thing about it is, unlike most pretty dense physio and anatomy texts, it doesn't have any detail about the vascular system, cardiopulmonary stuff, neural stuff. It just focuses on muscles, movements, bones, and what she does exquisitely well, because she's written it for dancers as well as for other students. So she's written it for the layperson. It just explains exactly what functions everything does and builds it up in a really good way. And its understanding of transverse abdominis, of psoas, of all these different elements of how the body worked. The way it explained that, and I became on a first name basis with what the muscles are, how they work, and how to train them. It was a massive advantage to me having that book as the first one I started with. I could not recommend it more highly. There's been a reprinted edition, so the latest one is a revised edition, so I would strongly recommend that. We'll have links in the show notes to it, but just an absolutely cracking book from a technical point of view. And the other technical book is Mike Boyle's New Functional Training for Sports. In 2003, maybe 2004, I got this book. I was at Borders, which was a kick-ass bookstore that I used to spend a fair bit of time in. And I read the book, and so it was I just finished my first year with the Dandenong Rangers in the WNBL, and I was looking to upskill. And at that point in time, it wasn't like it is now, where there's this just river, there's this sort of tsunami of information out there. You had to really go look for info, and I just stumbled across this book, and it was one of those moments where I was blown away, because here was someone who had thought processes that were similar to mine, but he was 10 years ahead of me and twice as smart. And I basically highlighted every part of the book, and I've lent it to someone. I really read it because I'd love to show just how highlighted the book is. But it built on a wonderful, like, this book plus the anatomy book were just amazing kickstarts for my career. And the new edition is even better. It's chock-a-block with great info. It's a really, really good book. So if you're an S&C coach that wants to be the best you can be and you don't buy this book, I think you're a bit crazy. It's really, really valuable. And sometimes you'll read it and it'll say, some of the stuff will seem obvious. And what you've got to remember is it's obvious because pioneers like Mark Verstegen, like Mike Boyle, these guys pushed the field forward so much that some of the things that they wrote, they weren't obvious 10 years ago. So really worth a read. Very different book now, different sort of category altogether. I sort of think of books as, you've got your technical books, and then you've got your more generalist understanding human science and the world books, and then you've got sort of your manuals that help you to be a better human within that world. This one, Bill Bryson, A Short History of Nearly Everything. It's really a love letter to science and scientists. It's an amazing grounding in the history of the cosmos, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's funny, it's easy to read. I've read it quite a few times, and I don't know, I really like the way it forces you to contemplate what little specks we are on the time scale and the spatial scale in the universe. And it reminds me too, in terms of other forms of this, the documentary series by Neil deGrasse Tyson, The Cosmos. That's an absolutely amazing series to watch. Everyone should watch that as well, and that's entertaining, digestible, and just brilliant. I love that series. So that's that one. And also on Masterclass, which is a great sort of platform where the masters of different fields come along and explain how they do stuff. He has a how to understand and communicate scientifically, and I think that I'm like really hanging to get into that course. I think that'll be great. Another book it's a tiny book, and yet again it's a book that I just happened to find on my dad's bookshelf, and I know that because I've stolen it from him, because he writes his name and the year on every book that he has, and it's from 2007, so I guess I read it sometime after that. It's called The Dip by Seth Godin, and its sort of subtitle is A Little Book That Teaches You When to Quit and When to Stick. And the amount of times I've been in that sort of valley of despair with Core Advantage, where we really didn't think we were going to make it, and where we weren't even sure whether this crazy idea we had was going to work. The amount of times I would go back to the dip and realize that although it didn't feel like we were making much progress, that was just because we were in the dip. And the dip idea is that when you first start doing a thing, anything, you'll have those kind of newbie gains where you go, oh, well, this is pretty easy. I'm pretty good at this. And then, because you're in the middle of your Dunning-Kruger effect where you don't know what you don't know. And then as you try to achieve mastery, you enter into the dip where it's like, oh, this is really hard. And this book's a great way of explaining that. And I think what it did a really good job of too is telling what was a cul-de-sac. And a cul-de-sac's quite different to a dip. So a cul-de-sac's just a waste of time, and you should quit it and go find something you can actually get good at. And so for us, delivering online training, that was a cul-de-sac, as in delivering people from Queensland who would get in touch with us and want us to deliver training to them while they're in Queensland rather than training in the building with us. And we did it because it seemed cool and because we wanted to help people. I don't like to say no, but it wasn't good for anyone. It wasn't the experience we wanted to do. So it helps you identify if you are in a dip or a cul-de-sac. And if you're in a dip, you just keep on driving. If you're in a cul-de-sac, you need to quit early. That's the trick. So quit things that aren't working. And For shorter form or audio consumption stuff, so Seth's podcast, Akimbo, that's great. It's a really well-structured, fascinating podcast, and he speaks brilliantly, and really worth listening to. So I couldn't recommend them more highly. And he's also got the I think it's the longest-serving blog, or the most widely read blog in the history of the universe, and he does post on that daily as well. But yeah, great little book. And the last one, and I think this is, this is not the exhaustive list. This is just sort of my top 5. The last one is Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way, and I just don't think you could come up with a more timely book than this right now. We're stuck in lockdown. It's a really challenging situation. It's difficult all around, and it's a really nice explanation of that Stoic philosophy idea of, well, to take a boring example, you have to do the dishes. You don't want to do the dishes because it sucks. It's boring, and the idea is that in that particular low-grade example, well, you have to do the dishes. The only choice you have is, do you enjoy it or don't you? And so you just kind of have to go, oh, yep, I may as well choose to enjoy this experience. Every experience we have, we kind of have to, that we can't get out of, we have to. And he gives lots of really good historical examples of people who've had that mentality. But the bigger message is that idea that when you encounter a difficulty, that difficulty is actually what's going to make you better. So you will have to work harder and smarter and overcome that obstacle, and you will then be a better operator in whatever sphere you encounter the obstacle. Because if we had someone in front of us smoothing out the path for us our whole life, and we never encountered an obstacle, we would have no strength, no agility, no resilience. We need obstacles to get better, and it's understanding that that's the way. So yeah, great book, pretty short, easy to read, and I think the information in it would be particularly sticky at the moment, just because of our current context. So yeah, cracking book. So yeah, that's my little episode on reading, and the idea that if you can exploit neuroplasticity, if you can upregulate that ability to concentrate, the world's your oyster. I really do think that. Please do let us know if you liked the episode, if you didn't like it, if you'd like more of these sorts of deep dives on some concepts. We'd love to hear from you. And if you have questions, if there's a thing that you are interested in finding out about, happy to chat at length about whatever you want to hear about. All right. Thanks, guys. See ya. This episode is proudly brought to you by Iron Age. At Core Advantage, Iron Age are our trusted choice due to the versatility, durability, and overall quality of their equipment. Whether it's for a home gym fit-out or a commercial gym, you can find everything you need at ironage.com.au. Okay, hope you enjoyed that episode. You'll find all the relevant show notes over at coreadvantage.com.au. Also on the website, you can find more information about our athletic development services, education, short courses, and everything else we're up to. So that's coreadvantage.com.au. Cheers, guys. See ya.